Okay. All right, so Parshas Mishpatim has a lot of mitzvahs. I also feel like we should talk about something from Parshas Yisro. So, the common denominator, or one of the common denominators between Parshas Yisro and Parshas Mishpatim, is the inyan of setting up a bezdin, of having batei dinim. So, for example, in the beginning of Parshas Yisro, so we know the story that Yisro comes to Moshe, and he sees that Moshe Rabbeinu is the only one taking care of every single yid. He says, it's too difficult for you to do this. You have to be able to set up a system of courts, of a hierarchy. Small shadows go to the smaller bezdin, and they'll work their way up to you. So the pasuk says like this. So okay, that's the idea of Parshas Yisro, and Parshas Mishpatim begins, Eila Mishpatim Asher Tasim Lefneim. These are the laws that you should place before them. So it's interesting. It's hard to know exactly what the simple pshat is. I guess on the most basic level means these are the laws of all Parshas Mishpatim that you should tell the Jewish people. Asher Tasim Lefneim. Chazal darshan in a few places that this is not only talking about the Jewish people in general. Eila Mishpatim Asher Tasim Lefneim. This is referring to the courts that were set up in the beginning of Parshas Yisro. That's what's being referred to over here. And from here we learn, the Gemara says, Lefneim, Lefnei Hadyotis, Lefneim, Lefnei Akum, that there's a special mitzvah when the Torah to go to a Jewish court, a court that's going to paskin based on halachas of Torah, and not to go to, even to any other court like that. So the idea of setting up batei dinim, so that's what we're going to be talking about. There's many mitzvahs that are involved in that category, but one specific one. Ironically, a mitzvah that's neither in Parshas Yisro or Mishpatim, but it's revolving around this Nakuda. So, a little background. In the beginning of Parshas Yisro, when Moshe Rabbeinu is told by Yisro the advice of setting up batei dinim, so the Torah tells us a few certain qualities that Moshe Rabbeinu sees as necessary in order to be a dayan. And this is, again, Yisro suggests this, Moshe agrees, and it's with the consent of the Rebbeinu Shalom. So these are necessary milas, necessary midas to have. So there are a number of them mentioned in Parshas Yisro, and it's repeated with slight variation in the beginning of Parshas Devarim. Moshe Rabbeinu reviews over the whole Maisa. So Moshe Rabbeinu also over there says over the story, and he says also these certain qualities that are necessary to be a dayan. So in Parshas Yisro it says like this. Ata techzeh mikol ha'am. Then Yisro tells Moshe Rabbeinu that you should appoint from the people with the following qualifications: Anshe Chayil, warriors; Yirei Elokim, God-fearing; Anshe Emes, people of truth; Sainei Betza, people that hate money. Those are the qualifications. Those are 4 qualifications: warriors, God-fearing, honest, and hate money. Those are the 4 qualifications mentioned in Parshas Yisro. In Parshas Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu repeats it, and he says the following thing: Havu lechem anoshim. He's saying over the Maisa that he went to find amongst the people chachamim unavainim, wise people, v'yeduim l'shiftechem, and the other qualification is that they should be known to the shvatim. They should be known to the shvatim. So again, there's different ways of counting these qualifications and to define them. That so much is not for now, but altogether, it seems that the pasuk from Parshas Yisro and Parshas Devarim, we have 6 qualifications of what's necessary to be a dayan, and we'll see in halacha there's actually a 7th one that Chazal sort of deduced on their own. But this is just the background that we need. So take a look at Marmukah number 1. So the Rambam, this is a Rambam in the beginning of Hilchas Sanhedrin. Okay, so Perek Aleph and Halacha Zayin of Hilchas Sanhedrin. The Rambam, in the beginning of that parak, he's talking about the qualifications that are needed to be a member of the Sanhedrin HaGadol. Now, to be a member of the Sanhedrin HaGadol, that takes a lot more than just the 7 or the 6 or 7 qualifications mentioned in Yisro and Devarim, but that's not for now. But then the Rambam says in Halacha Zayin, Bezdin Shel Shlosh. Okay, fine. So let's say you're not in the Sanhedrin HaGadol, but you want to be able to be on a lower court, a regular Bezdin of 3. Tzarech sheyeh b'kol echad mehem shiva dvarim. To be a dayan, a halachic dayan on a real Bezdin, even if it's a lower court, you have to have 7 qualities. Ve'eluhein. And these are the 7. Chachma, you have to have Torah knowledge, wisdom. Anava, humility. Yira, God, fearing God. Sinas mammon, a hatred of mammon. Ahavas emes, a love of truth. Ahavas abris lahen. You have to have people like you. You have to be a likable person. Ubali Shem Tov, and have a good reputation. Those are the 7. Now the Rambam then goes on to explain what each one is and its source in these psukim, in these parashas that we have in Yisrael and Dvarim. It says the Rambam, I'm not making this up, these are all things that are explicit in Chumash. So for example, number 1, it says in Pasuk in Sefer Dvarim, Anashim Chachamim Unavainim. That was the first thing that Moshe said he's looking for. Anashim Chachamim Unavainim, Hari Bali Chacham Amr. That means the person has to be, number 1, a Talmid Chacham. He has to be able to know how to pass in the Shaila, to know to get to the bottom of the topic. So that's number 1, wisdom, knowledge. Then Moshe Rabbeinu, again in Parshas Dvarim, said, "V'yidum l'shavteichem," known to your tribes, known to the Jewish people. What does that mean, known to the Jewish people? So one interpretation could have been is that people know who they are. We're familiar with his background and so on. The Rambam interprets it differently. The Rambam says, "Elu sheruach habriyas neichem," known to the Shvatim. Over here, Yedua doesn't just mean we know who he is. It means he's likable, he's connected. People feel a likability towards him. Sheruach habriyas neichem, that people have a certain comfortability with the person. And now the Rambam goes on to say, okay, and what creates, what develops this level of camaraderie, this level of connection, of likability? Shiyubali ayin tova, you have to be positive people. Nefesh shvela. Nefesh shvela in this context doesn't mean humble per se. It means like simple, not overly complicated. Like a pashadiyah type of mentality. V'chavras and tova, someone that knows how to get along with people, knows how to relax, knows how to let his guard down. And speaks pleasantly and softly with people. You have those qualifications, people will like you, and that's called Yidul Shavteichem. So you have wisdom, you have to be a Talmid Chacham first and foremost. You have to be likable, people have to like you. And then in Parashas Yisro we have other qualifications. So the first qualification in Parashas Yisro was Anshe Chayil, a soldier. What does that mean? Anshe Chayil, a man of valor. What does that mean? So says the Rambam, Elu shehin giborim b'mitzvahs. It means that you are a gibar, but not necessarily in battle. It means in the battle against the Yitzhar. In other words, that you're a tzaddik. In other words, you check all the boxes in Shulchan Aruch. The person is meticulous about his own shmiras and mitzvahs. The kavshnes yitzran and conquers their own yitzhara. What we call a tzaddik. Ubechlal Anshe Chayil, says Rambam, also included in this Anshe Chayil soldier is shiel, and it's interesting. Shiel hem leiv amitz, that a person that the dying also needs to have some level of courage to be able to stand up for the downtrodden. Lahatzel ashuk miad ashkait, and with this courage and a sense of wanting to help, wanting to save. You see someone that's suffering, to be the one to jump out of the crowd and to do something about it. That type of mentality, that type of personality. Kinishinemar, like the pasuk says, v'yakam Moshe v'yashem, that Moshe by the daughters of Yisrael, that they were being bothered with the other shepherds. He got up and he saved them. That's Anshe Chayil. Then the Rambam adds in another quality, which is not mefurish in the psukim, but it's the seventh one. Uma Moshe Rabbeinu Anav, and if we're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, comparing to Moshe Rabbeinu, so just like Moshe Rabbeinu was humble, Av Kol Nayin Tzarech Liyas Anav. Okay, and then back to the midas of the psukim, Yirei L'Kim. That was the next thing that Yisro mentions. Kim Hashmai, that's obvious, a God-fearing Jew. Sainei Betza. What was the other one? The next one was hates money. What does it mean? Hates money. It means Af Mamin Shelahem Einin of Halamo. It means to hate money. It means that even their own possessions, their own money, they're not fakayf, they're not completely obsessed with even their own money. V'loi right from the kabetz mammon, and certainly they're not obsessed with accumulating wealth. Okay, they need money to survive, but it's not a big deal in their mind. Anshe emes, and what does it mean? The seventh midah, the men of truth. It means she right from achar tzedek machmas atzman b'daitin. It means that these are people that want to find the truth and discover the truth, and for justice and truth to be fulfilled, to be existing, because they feel an inner sense of justice and right and wrong, not because of any outside motivation. These are people that are drawn to truth, that they appreciate that truth. Again, how do you determine that you have these qualities? Okay, whatever. That's up to the Sanhedrin, the ones that are giving smicha. They figure out you have these qualities. These are the qualities that we have, the 7 midas that it takes to be a dayan, all based on Pesukim and Yisro and Dvarim, with one added one of Anivas that we just know on our own because that was the quality that Moshe Rabbeinu is known by. Okay, that's the one. Fine. So now we have a pasuk in Dvarim as well. That the pasuk, it's funny when you're reading it off the top, it's just kipshuta. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with this, but Chazal interpreted that it's very negative to this. So take a look at Maramaka number 2. There's a pasuk in Parshas Dvarim, and again, it's in that story where Moshe Rabbeinu is repeating over the Maisa of setting up judges, and Moshe Rabbeinu then turns to the Jewish people and gives them certain mitzvahs that we have revolving around Bezdin. It says in pasuk, it's in Sefer Dvarim, Lo sakiru panav b'mishpat. Lo sakiru panav b'mishpat. Pashtas l'char would mean don't show favoritism in judgment, something like that. The simple interpretation would probably be that this is talking to the judge. In other words, when cases come to a judge, to a dayan, you shouldn't show favoritism. You should be honest and truthful and judge accordingly, whatever the mishpat dictates. Chazal interpret the pasuk to be different. That this pasuk is really not speaking to the judge; it's speaking to the one or the body of people that are in charge of appointing judges. Lo sakir b'ana mishpat means don't show any favoritism or deviate from the halacha when you're in the position of appointing judges. In other words, whatever is necessary in appointing judges, technically that's the guidelines that you should be following, nothing else. So take a look at Maramaka number 2. This is the Sifri, the Medrash in Parshas Dvarim, interprets it like this. Again, so it says in pasuk like sakir panav b'mishpat, don't show favoritism or personal negias when it comes to mishpat. Says the Medrash, zeh hamamuna lo hayshiv dayanim. That's the tradition of Chazal. This pasuk is not talking to the dayan; it's talking to the one or the group of people that are in charge of establishing the dayanim. In other words, it says the Medrash, Shema Timer, as you might say, if let's say you're the people in charge, Shema Timer, you're the body in charge of this. You might say, listen, Ish Pliny, no, this guy, he's wonderful. Everyone's going to love him. He's a nice guy. Aishivin Adayin. Let's make him a dayan. Or Ish Pliny Gibar, or he's a powerful person. Everyone's going to listen to him because he's powerful. Aishivin Adayin. Let's make him a dayan. Or Ish Pliny Kraivi, or a little bit less, altruistic. He's a relative of mine. Aishivin Adayin. Make him a dayan. Or Ish Pliny Yedeba Kalashin, he's very articulate. He knows all the languages. It looks good. Make him a dayan. Aishivin Adayin. So says the Medrash, all of those things. That's what the Torah is saying. Don't show any favoritism. Those are not the people. Those are not the qualities and criteria that you need. Nim says because if you appoint people like that, mezak is a chayiv, mechayiv is a zakai. They're going to make mistakes in the din. They're going to make the wrong judgment. Leibnei shurosh, lav dafka because the person's a terrible guy. Any day he's not qualified to be a dayan. He's not. He shouldn't be in that position. He doesn't know the halachas. So malav kilu hikripan b'din, and then when you appoint him like that, and then he comes up with the wrong psak, it's your fault. It's your fault, and it's as if you, actively messed up the din Torah, by putting in the wrong guy. That's the Medrash. Now, what's interesting is that the example the Medrash gives of what not to do based on this pasuk is to appoint someone that doesn't have knowledge, that doesn't know, because that was what the Medrash said. You point this, you point that guy for all these, other qualities that are nice about this guy, but he doesn't know the halach. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's going to end up being mechayiv as a zakah, mezak as a chayiv. He's going to mess up the Torah, and that's the violation of a secure panav b'mishpat. The indication is that although we saw from Parshas Yisrael and Parshas Dvarim that there are 7 midas that need to be the boxes need to be checked in order to be a dayan. And one of them, maybe the first one, is wisdom, is knowledge, is to be able to be a Talmid Chacham. And the Medrash seems to be focusing that in terms of this Isser of like Sakir B'Nam B'Mishpat. The Medrash seems to be focusing on that first box of Chacham, of wisdom. And that was the example the Medrash said, right? That if you violate this prohibition and you appoint someone that does not that does not have this quality, he's going to end up paskening wrong, not because he's a bad guy, because he doesn't know. In other words, what box are we talking about? Torah knowledge. What's interesting is that that's interesting for Chazal to determine, because we have 7 qualifications that are necessary based on Yisrael and Parshas Dvarim. But Chazal are harping on and focusing on it when it comes to this lav, to the Chachma part, the knowledge part. So let's see how this works. So what about if a person has the Chachma but doesn't have the other boxes? Is that also a violation of Leisakir B'Nam Mishpat? Or are those just things that you're supposed to do lechatchila, but there's no technical law for it? And we'll see where this takes us. So take a look at Maramaka number 3. So the Sefer Chinuch. So this is the Chinuch in Parshas Dvarim, in Mitzvah Taf Yud Daled. So he's talking on this law of Leisakirim Banu Mishpat, and says the chinuch like this: Shenimna Bezin Hagadol. It's a mistake. Shenimna Bezin Hagadol. This is a prohibition that's addressed to the Bezin Hagadol, or Rosh Galus, or whatever, whoever the leadership is. Shlayam Dayan Lishbeit Ha'am, to not appoint a judge to be a judge for the people. Someone that doesn't have the knowledge necessary in Torah to be a dayan. In other words, that's the simple pshat on the medrash, right? That was the example the medrash gave, that you can make this other people a dayan, but then they're going to make a mistake in the Torah because they don't have the knowledge. And also, evidently, the main isra over here is appointing someone without the proper knowledge of Torah. And this guy might have other wonderful midas, maybe even midas that are necessary, but he doesn't have the most important one, which is Torah knowledge. That's going to be violating this prohibition. If he doesn't know the necessary knowledge of Torah, you can't appoint him as a dayan. And that's what the pasuk is talking about. Okay. Then the chinuch goes on to say that, and I'll give you a little bit of the background to appreciate this. Very often we do find this in mitzvahs b'chlal, and the chinuch in particular, we find this, is that mitzvahs aren't necessarily so black and white. You could have different levels to a mitzvah. In other words, there can be a primary aspect of what the mitzvah is, and you could have secondary aspects of the mitzvah. And there are nafkaminas, by the way. Very often, it's not related to over here so much, but you could have cases like this where, let's say you have a prohibition where the punishment to violate that would bring malchus. So the klal is that the only time you're chayiv malchus, and this answers a lot of difficult Rambams, by the way, but the principle is that the only time there's a chayiv malchus or a punishment in Bezdin for a violation of a lav is only if you violated the primary prohibition. If there's secondary prohibitions contained in that, there's no chayiv malchus over here. So the chinuch over here is going to tell us that this is another example of this. There's a primary lav, but there's also a secondary lav. The primary lav is, as we mentioned, and what sort of sticks out the most from the medrash, which is appointing a dayan that doesn't know enough Torah, doesn't have enough knowledge. That's the primary prohibition. But says the chinuch, but you should know, at least as a secondary level to this prohibition, even if a person does have Torah knowledge, if he doesn't have the other midas required, that's also a violation of this lav. It might not be the ikr lav, but it's al kapanim a tafel. It's a secondary aspect of the lav. It's not going to be as severe. You won't get malchus for it or whatever, but it is a secondary issue. It says the chinuch dinaha, and one of the details, one of the halachas coming from this lav, although it's not the primary inyan of the lav, but it is one of the halachas that come off as an offshoot of the lav, is kegoy mash'am rozal, is what we find in Chazal, shekeshem shetzarech haroy lias dayan lias deir dinei Torah, that just as primarily the dayan has to check off that box of Torah knowledge, kemoy kein tzarech lias bal midas, so too the person also to have other midas. V'adam kashi has to be an erlicha person. In other words, what he's referencing is all the other 6 qualities that the Rambam listed in Hilchas Sanhedrin based on Parshas Yisro and Parshas Devarim. And now says the chinuch, and how do we understand the relationship of why those are secondary versus Torah knowledge, which is primary? Like, how do we conceptualize this avera? So says the chinuch like this: Shal yomer hanidain tol karim beinei nacha. Because what we, in other words, the general objective, says the chinuch, of this lav is that we want to set up a dayan who is going to A, paskin correctly, and B, the psak is going to be carried out. Whereas we want there to be mishpat, in the Jewish people, and the bezdin is in order to facilitate mishpat. For mishpat to happen, for there to be a system, for everything to function properly, you need 2 things. You need the dayan to get it right, and you need people to listen. So says the chinuch like this. Number 1 is to get the dayan should get it right. That's the first box, Torah knowledge. That's the primary objective of the slav. But as a secondary thing, even if he does get it right, he needs people to want to listen to this guy. So if this guy's a menovel, sheikh, it's not likable, he technically gets it right, but no one's going to be paying attention. Everyone's going to say this language. The people are going to look at the dayan and say, take the beam off of you, before you're telling me to take a splinter out of my arm, take the beam off of your head. In other words, you're telling me what to do, look at your own life. And the people are not going to listen to the psak, even if it's correct. So therefore, says the chinuch, the objective of lav has these 2 qualities to it. Primarily, paskin correctly. Secondary, make sure people listen to your psak by having good midas. And so that's the picture of this lav according to the chinuch. Okay? So far, so good. What's interesting is the Rambam. The Rambam agrees to the chinuch as well, and that's what it seems over here, that certainly there's a primary inyan of this law, which is Torah knowledge, and there's a secondary element of this law that the dayan should have all the other 6 qualities of midas too. But the way the chinuch put it was very neat and organized. The general objective is that people should be functioning al pi Torah. In order to have that, there has to be 2 steps. Step 1, a correct psak. Step 2, people listening. Okay, and that's step 1 of the vera, of the isser, and step 2, chachmas Torah and good midas. Fine. The Rambam agrees that these are fundamental and secondary, but he makes a shalom tavik. You'll see what I mean. Take a look at Maramok number 4. So this is the Rambam in Sefer Mitzvahs also. In Lois Esei Reish Pei Daled. Again, he's going on the same lav of Lois Sakir upon B'mishpat, and he says almost the same thing as the chinuch. Shehizra Bezin Agadol. Again, this is a prohibition addressed to the Bezin Agadol, Oy Reish Golius, or the head of the Jewish people, whatever the situation is. Shalimnais Dayan, not to appoint someone as a judge. Adam She'ein Chacham B'Chachmas HaTorah, someone that doesn't have Torah knowledge. Okay, so far that's the primary isser. To disregard his lack of Torah knowledge because of other milas that he might have. The Yibna Eisei Bavura meant to appoint him because of these other inyanim that you find within him, but you're ignoring the fact that he doesn't have the proper knowledge. That's a problem. Hinuhu Muzar Mizeh, that's the prohibition not to do that. What are you supposed to do? When you have this appointment, this position, which is a Torah position of being a dayan, Zulas, the only thing to focus on is is the proficiency of this person in Torah. That's the strong language. Rambam says Zulas. There's nothing else to think about except for his proficiency in Torah. His knowledge of the commands of the Torah and the warnings of the Torah, all the mitzvahs of Torah. Now, then the Rambam, so far, it's okay. So far with that, it's like, well, the only box to think about is Torah knowledge. What about the other midas that the Rambam himself said in Hilchos Sanhedrin are necessary? So now the Rambam hints to them. And the Rambam says, so again, the only thing to think about is his proficiency and fluency in Torah, and his personal habits and hanhagis that are properly fitting for someone who is a Talmid Chacham of his stature. Okay, that's what the Rambam just said. Okay, so the Rambam is hinting to all these other qualities that he said in Hilchos Sanhedrin, but he's not organizing it as clean cut as the chinuch. The chinuch said there's 2 categories. There's getting the psak right, which is about you as the dayan. That's the box of chachmas Torah, and then there's just a matter of people liking you and respecting you and all that stuff in order that they should listen. And those are the secondary midas that we have. The Rambam is putting it all in one big challah, that really the inyan is chachmas Torah, but along with that, as a secondary element, you also have to be living a life and have certain qualities within yourself that's sort of fitting with what you know, with the chachma that you have in your head. So we have to be magda this better. So what does that mean exactly? What does it mean that the main box is the Torah and the other midas are there because otherwise you're not living according to what you think? I mean, who cares? It's about getting the psak right. What exactly does this mean? If you're doing the chinuch, that's you want people to respect you, that's something else. But the Rambam doesn't at all say anything about other people listening to your psak. It's all like within you. It's almost as if all these other midas are somehow contained in that original box of chachmas Torah. And if a person isn't likable, and if a person isn't humble, and if a person isn't a gibor chayil, and the person likes his money, so then he doesn't have the Torah knowledge. I mean, he does. It's how we make sense of this, yeah.
Is this only this? Is there an assay of how to appoint it? Because
there is,
should not be.
Right. So there is an assay of shayftim v'shaytrim titin l'cha b'chol shirach. That is an assay, but it doesn't go into the details of who should be the dayan in certain ways. It's that there should be a court system set up amongst Klal Yisrael.
Putting out what you should do and likes to say what you should not.
Yeah. So they don't necessarily reflect each other. It's this law that's more specific of the qualifications. It becomes a little bit more apparent, the mixture over here. If you take a look at Maramaka number 5, this is the Rambam in Perek Gimel. Now, this is an interesting thing. It was in Perek Aleph in Hilchos Sanhedrin that the Rambam listed all the qualifications necessary to be a dayan. Chachmas Torah, all the midas and so on. That was all in Perek Aleph. all of a sudden in Perek Gimel, we'll speak about this in a few minutes, in Perek Gimel, that's where the Rambam goes back to talk about these qualifications and mentions this lav of Leisakir Bana Mishpat, that if you appoint a dayan without these qualifications, you're in violation of a prohibition. That's interesting. I would have put that right in Perek Aleph when you're introducing me to the qualifications needed. Tell me, by the way, there's a lav, backing this up. Okay, Rambam waits to Perek Gimel. We'll see. But over here in Perek Gimel, the Rambam says the following language: Kol Sanhedrin, Ein Melech, Ein Rosh Gaila, whether it be Sanhedrin, a king, governing body, Shehemidu Lehem Yisrael Dayan, that they point to the Jewish people a dayan, Sheina Hagam, who is not fitting, Ve'ena Chacham v'Chachma Torah, and he's not a Chacham in Torah, V'roili is dayan and fitting to be a dayan. Aval Pishu Kol Machmadim, he's the nicest guy in the world. He's mamash gevaldik, right? V'yesh le'Tovis Acheres, and he has other great qualities. Reizeh Shemidoy, that body, that person that established him as a judge, is Arba Loisaseh, violates the Loisaseh, Shenemar, Loisakir and Panu B'Mishpat. Now again, everyone knows the Rambam is very meticulous with his language, not an extra word, not an extra syllable. And the Rambam said, again, a Sanhedrin, a Melech, a body, governing body, that they establish a person to be a dayan, and he doesn't have the box. The box is necessary. What does the Rambam say? Sheina Hagun, Ve'ena Chacham v'Chachas HaTorah v'roili is dayan. He's not fitting. He's not a Talmid Chacham, and he's not worthy of being a judge. You're all over the place. Tell me what the point is. In the middle, he seemed to say the point. Finished. Right? That's the ending. So what is the Rambam trying to add with these other secondary words? She'ena Hagun, he's not fitting, and then Ve'ena is dying, he's not befitting to be a dying. What are you saying these extra? Rambam should just say straight, the Sanhedrin, the Melech, and so on, that they establish someone as a judge. Ve'ena Chacham, he's not a Talmid Chacham. So that's they're violating this law. What is the Rambam trying to add with these extra words? She'ena Hagun, Ve'ena Chacham HaZatar, V'roili is dying. So says the Bach. You don't have this in front of you. The page is it's too much. But the Bach and many Achronim say that what the Rambam is hinting to with those extra words, She'ena Hagun, and he's not royally as dying, what he's hinting to are the other midas. In other words, like we saw in the beginning of Hilchos Sanhedrin, there's 7 midas altogether that a dayan has to have. Number 1 is Chacham. But there's other qualities as well. And so the Rambam is trying to hint to us, again, that there's that this prohibition is not limited to someone that just isn't a Talmid Chacham. That's the primary prohibition. But there's a secondary prohibition if he doesn't have these other qualities as well. And the way the Rambam is hinting to it is by making is saying this sentence, that the person is Eino Hagun, Ve'ena Chacham v'Chachas HaTorah v'roili is dying. That's how the Achronim say it. But again, weiter over here we see that it's not so organized like the Chinuch. Again, the Rambam is making one sentence, and the primary focus of this sentence is Ve'ena Chacham v'Chachas HaTorah, that he's not a Talmid Chacham, he doesn't have enough knowledge to be the dayan. And in that context of what he's missing in that primary box of Chachas HaTorah, the Rambam is hinting in association with that he might it's also a problem if he's missing other midas too. So Eina Hagun, V'roi Lias Dayan, it's all in conjunction and sort of subsumed in this chesaron of Eina Chacham Chacham Satara. So we have to figure this out. So again, there's something going on over here, that there's an acknowledgement that all the midas are necessary. We're acknowledging that the box of Chacham Satara is primary. That's the most important condition, and the other midas are secondary. But somehow these other midas are somehow still part of that original box of Torah. So we have to figure out what this is. Okay, so in order to have a better clarity on this, so let's go back to the question I mentioned before. Why would the Rambam only talk about this prohibition in Perek Gimel? Again, Perek Aleph, that's the Rambam is setting up the practicalities. What a dayan has to have. What do you have to see in the guy in order for him to be a dayan? And those are the 7 midas. So that'll be the best place to talk about that'll be the best place to talk about the prohibition that's backing this up. He waits to Perek Gimel. So what is Perek Gimel about? So Perek Gimel is about, it's interesting, Perek Gimel is about the procedure of a din Torah. Talks about what Bezdin, the place that Bezdin should be sitting in, how the litigants enter into Bezdin, what position the dayanim should be when the litigants come in. It's literally the tzura of Bezdin. And to bring the point across even more, the halacha that said right before this law that the Rambam brings up in Paragimel, what's the halacha right before that? So said in Maramaka number 6, this is the Rambam. In halacha Dalet, the Rambam says, Kol bezin shel Yisrael, and again, this is the halacha that then flows into this isser of leisakir ban mishpat, of having all the boxes checked and so on. Says the Rambam, Kol bezin shel Yisrael. Whenever you have a bezdin, shu hagun, if it's a proper bezdin, shchina iman, the divine presence is with them. The shchina is with them. Lefichach, and because of this inyan, that a proper bezdin is a place of Hasharas HaShechina. So not only does that require a certain, so says the Rambam, Lefichach, therefore, tzrichen hadiyonim leishev be'em of a year of atif of a kovid rosh. Because of that, the dayanim have to act in a way that's befitting and becoming of having the Shekhinah in their presence. So they have to sit with Ema and Yira, with awe and fear and so on, Vatifa covered over, their heads covered, the Kavod Rosh with a certain sense of seriousness. For Aser L'Haklu Rosh, certainly it's prohibited for the Dayanim to have a sense of Kalas Rosh, or L'Sachek, or to laugh, or L'Saber V'Sich with Taylor, it's not to have conversations, the Bezdin in the Bezdin. El B'Divrei Torah Chacham, the only conversations that the Dayanim are allowed to have during the din term when they're sitting like that is only Divrei Torah and words of Chachma, nothing more. And then the Ram goes on, and the body that appoints someone as a dayan, and he's not Chagun, and he's not a Chacham, the Chacham is a Torah, and he's not roy to be a dayan, violates Leisakir B'Nei Mishpat. The context that the Rambam is putting that Aver Leisakir B'Nei Mishpat is in the context of the Hasharas HaShechina that's required, that a bezin should be living up to. So the Rambam told us that a bezin has to have a Hasharas HaShechina, and because of that, they're obligated to firzach in a certain way. That's bakavidik for the Shechina. And then the Rambam mentions this idea of Leisakir B'Nei Mishpat. What's the point? The point is like this. We were thinking until now, in the chinuch, let's say in the chinuch world, right, the world of the chinuch, what's the end of this law? It's very practical. We want to make sure that there's mishpat in Klal Yisrael. So in order for that to happen, you gotta have 2 points. The dayan has to get it right, and you need people to listen to him. Finish. It's a very practical Indian. In the Rambam, that's not the aside. Of course, it's true that you do need that. There's a practical aspect of this. But in the world of the Rambam, the fundamental nakuda of this law is that the dayanim have to be kalim for Hasharas HaShechina. They have to be worthy as people for the Shechina HaKadosh to reside within them. That's the nakuda over here. Now we know from the Svarat Doshim that the most important quality in the neshama, I spoke about this I think maybe this past Wednesday night, that the most important quality in the neshama in order for a person to be a kli for the Hasharas HaShechina is what's called chachma. This is called chachma. Torah, for example, is the ikr kli for the Shechina HaKadosh in the world, right? The greatest moment of Gilui Shechina was by Har Sinai, the Rebbe was giving us the Torah. In order for a person to be Zaychet to Hasharas HaShechina, the reason why the Torah is so Leisakir B'Nei Mishpat, he has to have these boxes. It's not the pshat, because otherwise he won't pass him correctly, and then other people won't be makabel his dinim. It's deeper than that. When the person is deficient in Torah knowledge, to whatever degree is practically required to that position of dayanis, it's not only that he's going to mess up the din Torah. The person is insufficient as a kli kibul for Hasharas HaShechina. Because only with Torah HaKadosh is a person worthy of Hasharas HaShechina, and only with the development of that quality in the soul that's called Chachma is a person able to be a kli kibul for Hasharas HaShechina. That's the nakuda. Now, to go a little bit deeper than this, because the nakuda over here is not just Torah knowledge, but Torah knowledge that brings with it Hasharas HaShechina and redefines the dayan as a kli for Hasharas HaShechina. So memela, the other midas that this person has to exude are not just like nice qualities because otherwise people won't listen to him. If this person, Taka, if his Torah is a Torah that makes him a kli kibul for the Shechina HaKadosh, then if the Shechina HaKadosh is within him, then everything about him is going to be different, is going to be uplifted, is going to be more divine, is going to be more nefesh elokis versus nefesh Bahamas. So when we talk about that the dayan is required to have all these midas, it's not the pshat because otherwise no one's going to listen and so on. These are simanim. These are simanim that taka the chachma that he has, which is the primary box to be checked off. The chachma that he has is not just a matter of he has the proper amount of wisdom. The chachma that he has is acting properly as a way in which he has a Hashras Shechina within him. And you see this in the fact that all of his midas are being brought out in such a way. More than that, let's go even deeper than that. Even within Torah, the reason why, I shouldn't say the reason, but even for Torah itself, for it to function as a kli, as a way to be makasher a person to the Hashras Shechina, and again, once the Hashras Shechina is within you, then everything about you is changed by that and uplifted by that, and then your normal midas are more elevated, more subtle, more refined, more godly. In order for Torah itself to function like that, Torah itself also has to have a certain condition, which is bittul. And that's why Torah has this quality of bringing Shechina into a person. Is Chazal say that Torah is compared to water, right? Ma'amayim, just like water goes from a high place to a low place, so the Torah always goes to the lowest place. And that's exactly why this person is worthy of being a vessel for Hashras Shechina, because the Shechina also, the Rabbanu Shloim also, as Da'aku Shval Ruach, the most important quality that a person has to have in order to receive the Rabbanu Shloim's presence in your life is humility and bittul. And in order for that bittul to be true and to be authentic, is if it's partnered with Torah. When you have Torah and it's an exercise, the person's knowledge in Torah is an exercise in humility, an exercise in bittul, an exercise of trying to connect to something higher than you, then that's the type of Torah that's going to bring Hashras Shechina. This is, again, it's a big discussion in the Sarak Doshim, but this is the primary difference between the Nefesh Bahamas, for example, and the Nefesh Elokis. The Nefesh Elokis within a person, that's going to be the part of you that is a shidduch with Hashras Shechina. And the most primary quality or mindset, that the Nefesh Elokis has is not about itself. It's bittul. That's its most primary and elemental midah. Nefesh Baham, the Nefesh Elokis might have chesed and rachamim. It'll have all the midas of the world, and so will the Nefesh Bahamas. But the driving force behind everything the Nefesh Bahamas does and feels and thinks is itself. And the Nefesh Elokis, everything that's driving behind its thoughts, words, and actions, and everything it does, is how to become nullified in God. And that level of bittul, that's what's called chachma. Chachma in Pnei Torah is called kaya. It's a combination of two words. Kayach ma, the ability of what? Of being nothing. Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest Talmid Chacham of all time, and the one that's the vessel for Hashras Shechina, says about himself, "Anachnu ma," that we're mamish nothing. So this, in other words, let's put it this way: the primary midas hanefesh, that without this there is no Shechina in a person's life, and with this, the Shechina is a perfect, that you are a kli for the Shechina K'daisha is what's called Chachma, and the quality of Chachma. It has two components to it. First of all, Chachma means knowledge, so it means Torah knowledge. But deeper than that, the Torah knowledge that a person has to have, which is the quality of Chachma, has to be built on a foundation of Koyach Ma. It has to be built on a foundation of bittul, of humility, of submissiveness, of being low, that the true, authentic waters of Torah will flow to the lowest place within, which is that person that feels low. And once a person is able to check that box of what? Of to be someone that's a Baal Chachma, which again means Torah knowledge, but Torah knowledge that's fundamentally rooted in the quality of humility of bittul, which is speaking directly to the Nefesh Elokis. That's its language. Chachma, that's its language. Then when that quality of Chachma is developed properly within a person, then all of the midas that a person then has are going to be redefined by that chachma. They're going to become more nefesh elokistic. They're going to be more driven they're going to be more driven in terms of idealism, and they're going to be less about the self. They're going to be more uplifted. They're going to be, the entirety of the person is going to be a kli kibul for Hashras Shechina. Once you have that quality that's called Chachma, like that's the core, that's the nucleus. You have Chachma, then everything, then the Shechina HaKadosh will spread to every corner of your life. Once you have that core quality of Chachma. This is what the Rambam is trying to say. Of course, the other midas are important, but it's not like the chinuch just, primary, secondary, get the psak right, and people listen to you. No. The nekuda is having a midas hachachma within the nefesh, of highlighting midas hachachma within the nefesh. And once that quality of chachma is developed properly, then automatically the other midas are going to then overflow with that sense of bittul and the light of the Rebbeinu Shalom that comes from that. And so practically speaking, the thing to really work on, says the Rambam, is that quality, that primary box of what? Of being a chacham b'chacham satayr. But not just knowing a lot of information. To be a chacham b'chacham satayr, that word chachma, which means Torah knowledge, but a knowledge that's coming and that's rooted with a sense of bittul and humility. And then mela, from there, you'll automatically have the other midas. Because by necessity, if you are taka, kli for Hashras Shechina, then all of you and all of your midas are going to become illuminated by that. And guess what? And if a person is deficient in these other midas, then it's just a siman that he's deficient in the primary box of chacham satayr. The guy might know a lot of information, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a chacham satayr. That his Torah knowledge should be a vehicle for Hashras Shechina. That's the other midas are a siman. Then they're going to be indicators of how is he holding in that quality of chacham satayr. This is why the Rambam kept on saying, let's say in Sefer Mitzvahs, in Maramukah number 4, he said that the only thing to think about is this person's proficiency in Chachma Satayra and him living a lifestyle that's in congruence with that. Because that's exactly what the Rambam is saying, is that the main thing is to be Chachma Satayra. And if that's proper, if that's true in what Torah truly is, and it's a midah of Chachma, then of course the rest of his life is going to be imbued with a sense of bittul and humility and truth and justice and not thinking about the self. And all the other qualities fall from that, whether it be a sense of inner honesty, whether it be a sense of courage, whether it be humility, obviously like Moshe Rabbeinu, all the other qualities, someone that's soft-spoken, that people like, these are all qualities that emanate from a quality of Chachma. They're all coming from Chachma. And Chachma is primarily brought to a person through Torah, as long as it's a Torah that's being learned in the context and with the objective of becoming humbled and becoming a klibul for the Rebbeinu Shalom through that. And that's exactly what the Rambam is saying in Hilchos Sanhedrin as well, that if a body appoints a dayan as a dayan, and he's ein a hagun, and he's not a chacham b'chacham, and he's not right to be a dayan, and the Rambam is hinting to all these side midas, all revolving and circulating the primary inyan, which is he's not a chacham b'chacham satayra. And it's not, and so if the Rambam, why not just say it? Say that if he doesn't have, he's not a chacham, or he doesn't have the other midas I mentioned in Perek Aleph. The answer is the Rambam is hinting to us over here what the nakuda is. That the nakuda primarily is he a kli kibul for Hashras Shechina? If he is, and which is primarily coming because of he's a chacham b'chacham satayra, then all of his midas are going to be uplifted by that. And if he's missing in his midas, it means it's indicative that his Torah is not Torah. And it's all the same inyan. This is why, again, the Rambam put this in Perek Gimel right after the halacha that the bezin has to be a place of Hashras Shechina. That's exactly where the Rambam put this halacha too, because this is not, again, if the Rambam mentioned it in Perek Aleph, where he's just checking boxes, so then you might think that this is a concept like the Sefer HaChinuch. It's just practical and checking boxes. But the Rambam, no. The Rambam Dafka puts it in the Perek that's talking about the process of Din Torah, and right after the moment where he says that the general atmosphere of the Bezin has to be one of Hashras Shechina, let's secure about a mishpat, because that's exactly what the dayan is. More than this, the Rambam then continues uncharacteristically. The Rambam then continues to bring agaritas throughout Shas to talk about the terrible thing of making someone a dayan that he's not worthy of. Take a look at Maramukah number 7. This is right after, again, the Rambam that we saw previously, that if you appoint someone that's not worthy, you violate the prohibition of secure upon the mishpat. Says the Rambam Halacha Zayin, v'oid amru. And Chazal also say that kol amamid li Yisrael dayan she'eino hagan, that if you appoint, if a person is appointed as a dayan and he's not worthy of it, ki'ilu heikim matzeva. It's as if a matzeva was established. Shenemar v'loisaknu chol matzeva asher sanei Hashem alekecha, that you're supposed to build a mizbeach, an altar for Hashem. Instead of a mizbeach, you built a matzeva. What's the matzeva? Without getting into details, a matzeva is a mizbeach that was built incorrectly. A mizbeach has certain qualifications and criteria. A matzeva doesn't fit those criteria about how many stones, whatever the situation is, that's called a matzeva. So you're so close, right? You're so close, but yet so far. Says the Rambam, if you point someone as a dayan and he's not worthy of being a dayan, it's like you made a matzeva. What shaykhs? What are you talking? First of all, fine, there's such an agata like that in the Gemara in Shabbos. The Rambam, why you bring this in? Like, this is not, what's the halacha? What do you see from this? You already said you're not allowed to do it. That's all I need to know. Again, the Rambam is telling us this nekuda. It's not a practical matter. It's not just a practicality. It is true. Now, don't get me wrong. The Sifri was correct. I mean, to say such a thing, of course, the Sifri is correct that practically, if the guy doesn't have the Torah knowledge, then the guy's going to paskin incorrectly, and that's terrible too. But that's not the main nekuda of the Isser. It's not the main nekuda of the Isser, according to the Rambam. The main nekuda is that instead of having a mizbeach, which is a place of Asheras HaShechina, you made a matzeva. You made a matzeva. And that's exactly what the point is, that a place or a vehicle that could have been a kli kibul for Asheras HaShechina has now been ruined. You made it not a kli kibul for Asheras. You put a matzeva instead of a mizbeach. And even more than that, says the Rambam. And if you had better options, right? If you had people that you could have appointed that were worthy of being a kli kibul for Asheras HaShechina, and you dafka pick this guy who's not, ki'ilu not asherah. It's as if you planted an avodah zarah. So there's all different levels. It could have been a place of kedusha and Asheras HaShechina. Instead of that, it wasn't. But if you could have had the mizbeach and you didn't on purpose, then it's mamish an avodah zarah. It's mamish the opposite of Asheras HaShechina. All these mashalim that the Rambam is bringing, again, these are all Gemaras, but the Rambam doesn't usually bring agadatas in Mishnah Torah. But they're all to bring out this point that what the side of the Isser is. Don't plant an asher by the mizbech. Says the Rambam. The meaning of that is don't plant an asher instead of the mizbech. And so to Chazal say, don't make idols of gold and silver. What does it mean, a god that's made of gold and silver? That's a dayan who was appointed because of his wealth. That's called an idol. So simple, okay, because he's in charge. Elohim means a person that's in charge. But it's deeper than that. What could have been Asheras HaShechina is now the opposite. More than that, the Rambam then ends off the paragraph with the following halacha. Marmuk number 8. Kol dayin shenasan mammon. If you have such a scenario where a person pays money and is then, because of his wealth, is appointed as a dayan. So this is like the worst, right? There's this one thing. The examples that the Medrash gave, he's a nice guy, he's a good guy, he's articulate. But I was like, okay, let's just go extreme. The guy is terrible, but he paid a lot of money, and now he's a dayan. So this is like the worst, the worst option. So he says, it's like the Asherah, right? It's like mamish, the exact opposite of bittul, right? The exact opposite. The guy's running after the position, which is the exact opposite of what we're talking about. So it says the Rambam, kol dayan shenasan mammon. If a person gives money, and that's why he's a dayan, in order to be appointed, there's a special mitzvah to disrespect him. To disrespect. Not just not to give kavod. How much disrespect. And now it's an amazing thing again. The Rambam never does this agadata stuff, but that's what the Rambam says. The Chazal say, it's based on a Yerushalmi, that this person should be disrespected as dayan, and the talis that he wears, which is usually a baggage of dignity for a dayan, you have to look at it like a covering that they put on a donkey. Like when you ride a donkey, they put a mat on top of the donkey. That's what the talis should look like that. Again, when you read the Yerushalmi, it's Yerushalmi in Masechet Shkalim. I think that Yerushalmi, what does it mean? It means don't give him covet, and don't be so like there's such a thing in the Goyish world, like the position, the honor. The guy is a menovel, and the sheg gets the position. It says Yerushalmi, there's no such thing. There's no such thing. If the guy is a sheikh gets he's not deserving the position, then there's no covet. There's no covet to him because of the position that he's in. He's not. That's not his. Should not be in that position. Okay. There's such a thing by a melech. I'm not saying not, but by a dayan, there's no such idea. So that's what the Yerushalmi means. But the problem is the Rambam already said this. Again, the first thing the Rambam said is that a person that buys the position should be disrespected. Okay, that means that there's no idea of just respecting him because of the position that he's in. The Omer Chachamim, look at the talis that he's wearing like a mat over a chamor. The Rambam is hinting possibly to this nekuda is that the chamor means nefesh habahamis, it means chumrius, it means physicality, the opposite of elokus. The opposite of elokus. The whole inyan of the dayan is that he's a klikibel for Ashras Hashchina. He's not the chamor. He's not a chomer. He's not physical. He's tzura. He's spiritual by nature, and everything about him, all of his midas are tzuradik, are elokustic. The opposite of that is to be chomer, is to be the word chamor, donkey in Maral Sivmal always means the representation always represents physicality, low, base, the opposite of divine, the opposite of elokus. And that's the point over here, is that this guy is he's a chamor. He's a chamor. And that's the Ram is saying, that's the Nakuda. He's hinting to us what the Yisrael is. And says the Ram the ends off, and this is the way it's supposed to be. That the way of the Chamer Rishonim is, Barchem El Isman is the last thing, they're running away from being appointed as a dayan. And they're avoiding being in this position of power at all costs. Until it becomes clear, there's no one else that can do it. If they don't take the position, people are going to make, there's going to be terrible mistakes and things are going to fall apart. They have no choice. And and even with that knowledge, they would only take the position if the klal is like pushing and pressuring and forcing them, like Moshe Rabbeinu by the snake doesn't want it. So it's not, again, what's the point over here? That they should be running away from COVID? There's not a secondary thing. That's the Nakuda. It's the bittul, it's the quality of Chachma that ironically is what's repelling them from the position of COVID. That's exactly why they are deserving of that position. Not because they're nice people. No. Because that's the quality of Chachma that's required in order to be a klikibel for Ashras Hashchina. And that's the Yisrael secure about a mishpat. This is always why. This is, again, like the Rambam said, the 6 qualities we have in Parshas Yisra and Parshas Devarim, the 7th one that Chazal made it up on their own is that just like Moshe is an Anav, so too every dayan has to be an Anav. Because the side side of this sugya really is, and this is going to take, I don't have time to talk about this too much. There's other mitzvahs that speak about this nakuda also. The side of this thing is that every dayan has to embody a spark of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's really the nakuda over here. Is that Moshe Rabbeinu is pashtus b'kol davar dar. Every dayan is an extension of Moshe Rabbeinu, and because of that, Moshe Rabbeinu is not only Moshe Rabbeinu is the embodiment of Chachma. He's the embodiment of Torah that is completely elokustic. And there's nothing about Moshe Rabbeinu that's chomer. Moshe Rabbeinu, he rides on Chamar, to get to Mitzrayim. He takes us out of Avdas. Moshe Rabbeinu is the embodiment of Tzura. And therefore, it's obvious that the most important quality, or one of the most important qualities that a dayan is going to have is to be an Anav like Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the Rambam, if you remember in Maramukah number 1, he said that part of, let's say, being a person of a soldier or whatever is to have courage to save people, and he had to go out his way to pick like Moshe Rabbeinu who saved the daughters of Yisrael. What exactly does that story help? Like, okay, I understand someone who wants to help other people. We have to give that example, because that's really the Nakuda. That's really the Nakuda. Moshe Rabbeinu is the nefesh kiss of all Klal Yisrael. And every dayan has to be an extension of Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, that's the Nakuda of your secure upon the Mishpat. We should always say that that's, it's all about Torah. But you have to make sure it's Torah. Yeah, that's the Nakuda. It shouldn't just be ideas, it should be Torah that's Elokus. And the way for Torah to be Elokus is if it's, first of all, learned consciously that it's from the Rebbeinu Shalom. And if it's learned with the goal, with the mentality to develop the quality of bittul and chachma within the nefesh, then the person will be changed, and all the middles will be taken care of. The person will be uplifted once the Shekhinah comes into their lives. That's one of the biggest sides of Torah Baal Shem Tov. That a lot of the sur mirah is taken care of once there's asay tayv. Ein tayv el Torah, ein tayv el ar, Yarl Kimas Arki tayv. So when a person has true Torah and true, which is light of Elokus, or Ayin Saif, then there's a lot of surah that's taken care of automatically. Okay, should be zeicha to that. Should be zeicha to have Dayanim back like the way it was. Make heaven.